Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about MBO behind the scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created MBOM. MBOM helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where MBOM Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy MBOM and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBOM yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Mastering the Business of Yoga. I am super excited that you're joining me for today's episode of the show. And today on the podcast, I'm really excited to be joined by Ariadne Vickers-Davis. And if that name sounds familiar, it might be because this episode originally aired in the private Facebook community in July. And so we actually did this episode live with some of you watching and some people tuning in to ask questions and that type of thing. So it was super fun to do it live. We had such a good conversation that I wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to hear it. And for those of you who are not familiar, Ariadne is a full-time yoga teacher who's based out of LA. And when the pandemic hit, like so many of us, she lost most of her yoga classes and was forced to pivot online, both with studios as well as on her own. And instead of just teaching online with studios, she decided to start teaching her own virtual classes, creating an online membership, as well as on-demand videos. So in this episode, Ariadne shares what it was like to pivot, how she's been able to build up a following online, and all the goodness that she's learned by taking her yoga business online. So super fun episode. I'm really, really excited to share it with you here today, and I hope that you guys enjoy this as much as I enjoyed recording it live. And before we jump into the episode, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Interval. Interval sponsored this episode live, and so I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about them. You'll hear a little bit more about them throughout the episode and later on, since Ariadne uses them and talks a little bit about how they've benefited her. But basically, they're a platform that has everything you need to run your yoga business, both in person and virtual. They give you an on-demand video library that helps you stand out in ways like recording HD content directly to the platform, with the ability to add music that students can adjust. I think this is the coolest feature. It's a feature I have not seen on any other platform so far. It's pretty awesome. You can also create programs and courses, as well as any video migrations. So Interval really empowers both individual instructors and studios, and they have an awesome instructor community as well as lots of resources. So I would definitely recommend checking them out. We have a special link. It's interval.com/J, like the letter J, /MBOM. So once again, that's interval.com/J/MBOM. And I'll make sure that's in the show notes for you guys as well. All right. I hope that you enjoy the episode. And without further ado, here is Ariadne. I'm really, really excited about this and really excited to have you here today, Ariadne. I'm stoked that you're joining me.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll let you introduce yourself. Can you tell people a bit about who you are and where you're joining us from and what you do and all that good stuff?
Yes, I would love to. So I am based in Los Angeles. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm originally from Florida. I've been teaching for almost 6 years. I'm like, that long? Yeah, I got my teacher training shortly after college. I grew up doing yoga with my mom, and I kind of like went headlong into teaching as a means of a survival job while trying to act here. And quickly realized that I didn't really enjoy acting as much as I enjoyed teaching. And I kind of transitioned from there. Yeah.
That's really cool. I love hearing that. We've been teaching for almost about the same amount of time. I got my teacher
Oh,
training
yeah.
in 2015.
So did I.
Oh, amazing. I love it. I feel like it's like an interesting time period because it's kind of like feels like you've been doing it forever, but also not that long.
Exactly, exactly. Like I can talk with people who've been like, "Oh, I've been doing this for like 15 years." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm not totally there." But I definitely feel more seasoned, especially teaching in a city like Los Angeles where it's just like so oversaturated and you really have to fight for yourself in a way. So I feel like
Yeah, I can imagine. Are you from LA originally?
I'm from Florida. I'm from a
Okay.
tiny little town in Florida, which is funny because my yoga experience there was very different than what I'm now experiencing. But yeah, not from LA.
Okay, cool. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what inspired you to become a yoga teacher. Like you said, you were practicing a little bit. Like what kind of actually was that moment where you're like, I want to teach this thing?
Yeah, I started doing yoga slightly with my mom when I was growing up. And I have this distinct memory of taking my first class with my mom when I was like 14. And at the studio, and this is pretty normal for yoga studios, there were no clocks anywhere. And I was so young and I just kept being like, okay, how much time has passed? Like, I've got to get out of here. Like, I'm not into this. And I remember after that class, I was like, oh my God, I'm never coming back here. Um, and then, of course, I did go back a couple of years later and I loved it. It was I kind of had two beginnings to yoga. I think like the most poignant one is I was fortunate enough to do a semester abroad in London. And I actually became really lonely. I had some friends there, but it was funky. And there was a little yoga studio around the corner. Um, and I just started to go there and to like absolutely love it. And it became this space where I felt like I could be totally myself. And when maybe I wasn't in a space in my life where I felt super comfortable or at ease, it was a place where I could go and feel like a little bit more whole inside of being like messy and a little out of control, if that makes sense. Um, and I graduated college, and I kind of, that can be a lost phase at times, especially if you were an acting major. And I just loved the idea of empowering other people not only to explore this physical practice but also to explore this space where it's okay to just be kind of like your messiest self and know that that's like lovely and amazing, and you're perfect as that. And I felt like I wanted to share that with other people because I had found so much comfort in just being like, okay, it's okay to not be perfect, or it's okay to be a little bit more of an emotional person. So really I just wanted to try and share that with other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I can also relate to like going to a yoga class and being like, yep, not for me. I'm good.
Exactly. Exactly. Especially that young. I was like, okay, I don't know what's happening here. And we've been here for hours.
Yeah, yeah, that's was my experience too. I was like, this is like pretty boring. I think I'm gonna do something else.
Yes. Exactly. It's funny.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so then starting to teach, like what was it like to actually like I guess be a yoga teacher in LA? Like you kind of alluded to the fact that it's like, it's like a big busy city. I'm sure there's a lot of yoga teachers there. A lot of people probably want public classes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny because I imagine that for newer yoga instructors right now, just as this industry becomes larger and really oversaturated in many ways, because I just feel like teacher trainings are kind of churning people out in a lovely way. It's an incredible experience to have. But when you come out here, I came out here like months after getting my teacher training and having like little to no experience teaching. And my first gig teaching was actually in a studio in Covina, which if you're not familiar with Los Angeles is not Los Angeles. It's probably about like an hour drive away. But at the time I found this ad on Craigslist. Like it was these two lovely women who owned the studio. And they kind of were like, yeah, it's a long drive, but if you want to do it, sure. And at the time I just had no concept of anything. So I was like, of course. So I started teaching these classes at this little tiny studio in West Covina, which again, if you're familiar with Los Angeles, is not Los Angeles. Um, and it was lovely. It was a space where really without me even knowing it, the stakes were low. I could really explore teaching with a group of people that was really just open to like kind of taking this journey with me of me understanding and figuring out and getting comfy. So I owe that studio kind of a lot. I spent like probably like a year there making that commute, but building a community of people at the same time. And of course, after a certain time, I was like, this drive is absolutely bananas. I can't be doing this anymore. And I moved on from there. I really, the main studio that I taught at pre-pandemic and that I will post-pandemic, is Y7. And I think I owe them a debt. Truly, took a huge chance on me. They were a studio. I don't know if you're familiar with Y7 at all.
No, I'm not.
They're a studio that began in New York. They have like 8 locations in New York, and they decided to start here in LA in 2016. And they were at the time a well-known studio in New York. And I was a teacher that had really had no experience. And I kind of just told them like, I really, really want this. And they took a chance on me, and really worked with me and, trained me essentially for free in many ways. So yeah, I owe them so much. And that really, really, that is kind of what jumpstarted my career to going all over the place and exploring lots of different things. But I mean, it's funky. I remember a time where I let a woman charge me $30, or sorry, not charge me. I charged a woman $30 for a private. It's always funny to look back on those things and be like, whoa, different time.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure at that point you were probably like, cool, somebody wants to do a private with me and they're willing to pay me. Like that's sweet.
Exactly. Exactly. It's funny. It's funny the things that you will not accept, it's the wrong word, but you will do in just like trying to get where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. I mean, great example with working at that studio that was an hour commute each way.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I mean, it's insane, but it's also like sometimes what you need to do to get your foot in the door and to get that teaching experience. And I really admire the fact that you did that. Because when you start adding up like your prep time for your class and then your commute time there, your teaching coming back, I mean, your pay rate was probably like pretty low.
Like, probably I lost money on that. Just like if you really culminate everything that happened, I definitely did, but worth it in the end. But it's always funny to look back.
Yeah, for sure. And so walk me through a little bit of like what your business looked like pre-pandemic. Like what were you doing other than teaching group classes and what did that all look like?
Yeah. I mean, pre-pandemic, my own personal business didn't really exist. I mainly taught for Y7. I was teaching support staff at Y7, which really meant I hired instructors. I managed our instructors. I gave our instructors feedback. And that was really my main gig. On top of that, kind of just raced all over the city, teaching other places as well, like little mom and pop studios. I spent some time teaching for Soho House. I have private clients. So in many ways, it was a lovely time. I can look back on it that way, but I was slammed with things that involved, just other businesses. I wasn't really promoting myself. And I think that so many instructors kind of learned, and that shifted so much during pandemic, but like we all did, I was just using studios kind of as like the marketing tool and just showing up.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's been so many interesting shifts in the yoga space over the last year. I guess it's like 15, 16 months now at this point with the pandemic. But yeah, maybe walk me through like March 2020 hits. The world is crazy. Like what do things look like for you as a yoga teacher?
Yeah, things were so busy for me up until like March 12th. Like basically I was still on a lot of calls. We were looking at like hiring new instructors. we're looking at shifting classes around. And I just have this vivid memory of, I'd actually just gotten out of therapy. And I got on a call with like our CEO, my boss, the other head teacher in LA with me. And they were basically like, okay, like we have to shut down. And at that time, it was such a funny space because none of us really understood what we were getting into or how long it was going to be. I think so many people were just like, this is going to be 2 weeks of chilling. And I decided, I myself was in a crazy space. I'd just gotten out of a relationship. I was like, I need something to do. I need something to put my energy into. And I remember I just did a poll on Instagram. I just said, like, if I were to do an Instagram live class, would you be interested? And of course, everybody was like, yes, 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 yes. And initially, I think we were all just feeling so out of control and dysregulated. I was like, if you'd like to Venmo me, you can, but like, I really want this to be open to everybody. Don't feel like you have to. And I did a live like 2 days later with my roommates as my students. And at that time, I didn't even know that Instagram Live cut you off after an hour. And so without realizing it, I was like 75 minutes into the class, but it wasn't even like recording anymore.
Oh my gosh. I actually didn't know that. So that's good to know.
I know, right? Yeah, I mean, who was using Instagram Live really prior to this? But it was lovely and fun. And it was a way for us to kind of connect and to share something in a time where we all were just beginning to feel so isolated. So I just from there started to do more and more of these donation-based Instagram lives. I would kind of make a little schedule every week where I would explore it. And yeah, I mean, that's really how it kind of began.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. And I think I saw a lot of this happening at the beginning of the pandemic, like lots of yoga teachers just hopping on like either Facebook or Instagram, wherever their audiences are, maybe both, and just like, when are you free? And people are like, I'm free all the time because I'm at home now. And,
Exactly.
like a lot of people are working from home and have been able to, but there was also, I mean, I knew like a lot of people who were like, I'm out of work right now. Like I worked at a restaurant prior and we're closed, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like there was a lot of need for just something to do that wasn't like watch the news.
Exactly. Exactly. Where it was like you were being present where you were, which at that time I think was so difficult to do because everybody was just thinking it was just such I mean, we're still in an unknown time in many ways, but it was so unknown in a way that many of us had never really experienced. And I think that just caused people to not be able to be present where they were. I mean, myself included. So I think that when those started happening, yeah, it was just, we were able to be present while sharing a very chaotic experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so you have this kind of like Instagram live schedule you're creating, you're doing these like classes with people, like by donation classes. At what point were you kind of like, I'm going to formalize this a bit more?
I probably don't think I really, well, I had a friend who actually got a Patreon, and she was using Patreon to create memberships. Which if you're not familiar with Patreon, you can really, it doesn't have to be exclusive with yoga or movement. Like artists use it. And I was considering doing that. And because at the end of the day, the donations were lovely and I had like a loyal crew, but when there was this realization of like, okay, we're kind of in this for the long haul and there's not really a light, like I have to check in that I'm making sure I'm making money and that I
Mm-hmm.
am also just trying to sustain a career for maybe when this is over, if I do desire to go back into teaching, which obviously I did and I do. And I really kind of was exploring the idea of Patreon. And Kyle from Interval reached out to me and was like, hey, like I'd love to chat with you about this platform if you have time. And I remember I didn't answer him. I was like, man, I don't know what this is. And then probably a month later, we finally hopped on a call and I was like, this is everything that I've been looking for. So it didn't really formalize it for real until I actually had like the full opportunity of just someone being like, hey, I have all of this ready for you. And so I finally was like, okay, like I can do this. And it was scary. It's funny to be doing those those Instagram lives. And that was terrifying at first, to feel like you're jumping off the deep end in a way. But then to, it's a scary thing um, to trust that people will want to consistently pay you for what you're giving them. Even though that sounds insane, considering that I was basically already doing it, it feels like a leap, and it definitely takes like a little bit of guts to explore that. And so I find that I launched, I think at the very beginning, the very end of November, I launched the beginning of December. Um, and it started out really amazingly. It honestly kind of surprised me. Because I think without realizing it, so many people were, I think, excited to have a space that was accessible in more ways than one, I guess, physically, fiscally. Um, yeah. And that's kind of how it began. And just creating a schedule from there, and like trying to sustain it and rep it has kind of been where I've been.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's really interesting, like you mentioned, kind of like this fear factor. And I think that it's so relevant for us. I mean, probably in all industries, but like, specifically as yoga teachers, it's like it's scary to start teaching. You start teaching at studios, and then it's really scary to like do your first private. And then it's really
Yeah.
scary to like
Yes.
build a website. And it's really scary
Yes.
to like go on Instagram live, and you're like, is anyone going to like be
Yes.
on the
Oh
other
my God,
side of
that's
this?
always the fear. Like, am I going to be out here alone? And then that's embarrassing. And
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure. There's so much with it. And I think it's one thing I've heard like so often from yoga teachers is like, especially over the last years, like, oh, I didn't realize how much the studio did to actually get people in classes.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I think I didn't really realize, and I mean, I'm sure I did at a subconscious level, like really the studio that you work at is just doing everything for you, as far as like pulling in clients for you, marketing. And when you kind of go out on your own and you don't have this beast behind you, it's very different. And it's a funny thing for so many of us who pivoted to online work. It was like we went from being simply the teacher that just showed up to being like everything, as far as like your little studio manager, your technical person, you're having to deal with like people paying for things, and like, fighting for the rate and the money that you deserve, which can sometimes like cause a lot of imposter syndrome. Um, yeah, you really, so many of us just went and like put on so many different hats that we had really never explored before.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that that's been, I mean, one of the most challenging aspects, I think, career wise for yoga teachers of the pandemic. And also one of like the most beautiful things that's happened has been like all these yoga teachers are now have their own businesses and have this experience of bringing people into their own spaces. And it builds a lot of confidence when you're like, oh, cool. Like people actually do want to pay me for what I do.
Yes, it totally does. Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah. Another thing that you brought up that I wanted to touch on is this idea of software. And it's like, I think there's so many like things out there that you're just like, I don't know how to do this or what to choose or like what's going to work for me. And I love that you were just like, Kyle was able to give you this platform where you're like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is great. I can do this thing now.
Yeah, exactly. And because I even think, like, not to knock other platforms and things like that, but like Patreon, it's like you're still piecemealing it together. I think it's like, it's lovely to find a place where then I wasn't having to do all the technical stuff alone, which I am a very untech savvy person. Like, it's almost a disease. I always say I was hexed at birth. Um, I don't know, stuff just goes wrong. So it's lovely to feel like I pivoted to something online. And while yes, I'm going out on my own, there feels like there's a support system there.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. That's really great. And yeah, I use Patreon I've got like a bonus show for members and stuff like that.
Oh,
And I feel
cool.
like I feel like it works really well for content creators. I do have a yoga teacher friend who created her membership on Patreon, but she switched off to another platform, just because it felt like it wasn't necessarily built for that. And I think that like not knocking Patreon at all. I think they're a fabulous platform, but it's like you
Totally.
bring something like Interval into the mix and it's like, they're built for yoga and fitness. Like
Yeah.
that's what they're designed for.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. And which is so lovely. And a couple of things like that have popped up. Um, but I mean, interval has just been such an easy interface to explore and to use, which I've loved.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Interval's actually sponsoring this episode. So maybe I'll take a minute to just tell listeners and people who are watching a little bit more about them if they haven't heard of them. Because, Kyle popped into my inbox as well. And I was like, oh, this sounds like a really cool software. I feel like I need to learn more about this. And as soon as I signed up for it, I was like, oh, this is amazing, super easy to use. And as somebody who's been supporting yoga teachers and yoga studios over the last year, it's like there has been a lot of like piecemeal and like hacking it together and using a bunch of softwares. And, there's so many great things out there, but having one platform where you can do it all, I think is super helpful. So a couple of the things that I love about Interval, and then maybe you can share some of yours, are that it basically has everything you need to run your yoga business for both in person and virtual, which is great. So, kind of looking to the future as we're reopening, and then also gives you an on demand library so you can put your recordings there. And then one of the coolest things that I think that they do is the ability to add music. I think that that's like amazing. And I feel like Zoom has definitely not figured that out yet. So, very cool that they've done that. And then, being able to have programs, courses, video migrations has been, some of my favorite things. So maybe you can say some of yours.
Yeah. I mean, I love Interval. I also love Kyle. I think it's just been a space where I can kind of collect everything and know where I'm at as far as like how many students I have. Like I definitely, it's a stressful thing to have to scrounge around and ask people to Venmo you or it feels slimy. So it gives you a space to feel empowered in what you're doing and what you're making and what you're creating, and also get what you deserve without having to deal with the fiscal money part of things. I mean, it's just easy to use. Like so many of my students, I remember were hesitant of like, I said I wanted to do a platform and they were like, I don't know. Like, it's so easy to just log on to Instagram. And we switched and they were all like, okay, it's such an easy, doable interface. And someone who is truly disabled at technology, I can do it. So that's kind of a bonus. But yeah, I love it. It feels like a community in a way that I'm creating on my own terms and that I have support from in the back.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that. I feel like that's like the perfect testimonial. If I can do it, you could do it too.
Yeah, exactly. Truly.
Amazing. If anyone wants to check it out, it's just interval.com. It's just like it sounds, and I'll make sure it's written out as well for people to go look at it. And so I would love to hear a little bit from you, like as you kind of built yourself up on Interval, like talk us through kind of how you set your business up.
Yeah. So initially I just did a monthly membership. That's how I started it. I think my goal was not to do class packages or not to do one-off classes, but was to try and get as many people as possible to buy this membership and kind of like get them into classes and joining me. So I started really low. And Kyle tells me I'm still too low. But I started just $8 a month in a way where in my mind, I was like, this, for what I am sharing with people, like this is an incredible deal. And my goal was really to just through that to accrue like as many people as I possibly could to get a membership. And in my mind, I think that absolutely worked. And, I was doing a lot of work, but not like an insane amount of work. I teach two live classes a week, and then I pre-record one class that I'll release every Monday. And it's an interesting thing because what I'm actually realizing kind of as time goes on, and I think it's probably different for everybody in different movement modalities, but I find a lot of people now like to take the recordings and not the lives. I have like my live crew that kind of always rides for me and always kind of comes in. But I have like probably like 80 other people that I don't know but I know that they are taking the recordings. So that was kind of interesting to figure out along the way is you think something will be one way, and then it ends up being totally different, just dependent on like who your client base is or what they're desiring. So it does require a lot of pivoting on your part of just trying to like read the room and figure it out. And it's interesting because really like social media is my only marketing tool in a lot of ways to like get things out there and to get people interested and things like that. It's worked like quite well, I will say. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been an interesting ride, just trying to continue to kind of cater to people, honor myself, hit like a middle ground of sorts.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that I feel like pricing is hard. Like you mentioned before, like I just, I set something that felt like fair. And I think it's also, we've gone through a lot of transitions where it's like, I don't know, kind of partway through the pandemic, it's like, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know if this is a forever thing. We don't know where people are at financially. Like a lot of people were impacted in huge, huge ways. And being able to have something that is, affordable is obviously like really helpful for like people who don't have jobs and whatnot, so they can still access things like yoga. Um, but yeah, I feel like this is one of the things that working with studios, like we had so many conversations about like how do we price our online classes and how many packages do we do and whatnot. And I think it's still hard. One of the things I am seeing quite a bit is a lot more people saying like online is here to stay and it should be the same price as in person. Like it's still a valuable experience. So it's an interesting side of it.
It is an interesting side of it. And I agree and disagree. I think it can go both ways. I think that I do have friends of mine and people that I know that do online because it is, and probably will stay online because it is something that is so much more accessible price wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think this whole experience of so many teachers shifting online also just created something entirely different and like a singular teacher's following, which I think can absolutely happen when you're getting on like larger superstar teacher scales. But I think it's different for, teachers that teach at a lot of different studios and maybe have like a couple of students that have memberships at that studios that love them. But it's interesting to really have to like go out on your own and also to then have to find your niche of like, what am I catering and what am I sharing with people that others cannot do or that like I am doing better, which is difficult. I especially think, I don't know, I do think yoga instructors can have major egos, but I do think it is also, yoga is a trickier space because it is so much more subdued and about sharing with others and kind of a oneness. So it can feel weird and it can kind of feel inauthentic to be like, I'm going to market the shit out of myself and share with people the singular thing that I think is incredible and say that they like, I deserve this. And that like, it can feel sometimes like slimy.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. I mean, this is one of the things that like, I think especially like specializing in the business of yoga, I've seen so much is like so many yoga teachers have these like beautiful offerings that they just feel
Mm,
uncomfortable sharing. And they're like, well, I don't want to just like,
absolutely.
tell people after classes about these other things I offer. And I
Totally.
mean, I get it. I get it. Like I've bought a car before. Like I know what it's like to be like, nope, no, I don't need that. No, thank you so much. I'm good. Nope, I also don't need that. Sorry, what is that extra cost for? Like nobody likes that experience of having to feel on guard in the sales process. And
No,
so I think as like yoga teachers, we're like, that's not why we're here. That's not why we're in this space. That's not why we're doing this thing. So it's like
totally.
we have to find this balance of like not feeling icky, but also like not getting caught up in this trap of like, it's not okay for me to share.
Yes, exactly. I do think that it is a fine line. And I do think that the more you put yourself out there in an authentic way, the more you will be surprised by the feedback you receive and how people take it. I think for myself, like if you had told me that I would be here promoting myself in this way, like a year and a half ago, I would have been like, absolutely not. Like that sounds terrifying. That sounds like something that would be way outside of my comfort zone. But I think that this period of time, while incredibly difficult, was also, I think, made so many people make decisions and choices that were really empowering and that were really different. And that I myself personally went so far out of my comfort zone in ways that I just didn't know were totally possible, in a way that can feel like amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool to hear, like when you say you've got, 80 plus members, people you don't know, like that's incredible. That's really cool that you've done that.
Yeah, no, it's been an incredible experience to like share this on a broader scale. Like I have somebody in Norway, and then I have like a couple people in the UK, in a funny way. I'm like, well, how did you even find me? Like, I don't even know. But it's cool. It's been a very fulfilling and different, difficult and wild experience.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like cool when I feel like yoga's been so geographic. Like,
Yes.
it's like
Had to.
you go to like the studio and the place that you live, or the studio and the place you're visiting, or something like that. And now it's like we can look at like, is there a teacher on this planet that's like teaching what I want to learn about? And we can find that teacher. So I think that that's like a really cool opportunity with online, and something I always like to encourage people who are maybe a little bit hesitant or scared of going online. Like, think about the possibilities of all these people on the planet. Like, there's
Absolutely.
surely somebody out there who's interested in what you have to offer.
Totally. And I think too, when you do step into something like that is scary, and it is so much about you just kind of like very rawly sharing something, you'll be surprised at how many people will be interested in it in a funky way. And it will also force you to look at what you're doing and be like, okay, I actually do have something that is worthy of sharing with other people. Because I think when we are at a studio, you can phone it in a little bit sometimes and fall back on what's behind you. But I think when you are sharing something just by yourself with really no other backing, it really forces you to look at what you are capable of and what you have to share. And it makes you like, I hate saying that this way, but like you have to kind of like drink a little bit of your own Kool-Aid for a second and kind of be like, okay, like this is like worth it. And that can be like wonderful and amazing and can make what you're offering that much better.
I love that. Drink some of your own Kool-Aid. That's great. One thing I wanted to ask you about was you'd mentioned before that like the tech was something that challenged you. Like, how's it been like, outside of the software piece, like, filming videos and finding equipment to do live classes? Like, how's that gone?
Um, for the longest time, I had like the cheapest tripod from Amazon that I basically just had to like rig and like take my hands off and be like, okay, stay. Um, Finally upgraded. It's been interesting. I was lucky enough to have done lives and online classes with another studio with Y7 actually. So they actually helped me they had done a lot of research in the correct angle to have your mat, like the correct angle to have your camera, the best sound equipment, what settings you should have your phone on. So I was really lucky in that I kind of could take what they were doing and be like, okay, I'm going to try and integrate as much of this as I possibly can into what I'm exploring, into what I'm doing. And I did. And like Interval has been incredible. And like they, sent me a webcam, and I wouldn't say that I'm really know what I'm doing piece by piece, point of view. And I just wouldn't have even really like thought about that prior to all of this. The right mic. I wouldn't have even thought like, okay, I need a lav mic. Like things like that I wouldn't have thought of, but that make the experience when you are requiring or when you are asking someone to pay for it that much better, right? And if you have the ability to um, buy these items or find them somewhere, I think it can just like level up what you are putting out there that much more. Like even, finding a space in your home that's not incredibly distracting. Like there's not a lot of stuff on the wall. So you will be the focal point. Yeah, it's a lot of subtle stuff that I just never would have really thought about.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's interesting too, because I would have said I was like relatively tech friendly, tech savvy when it came to
Yeah.
online stuff like prior
Yeah.
to this. But then supporting studios, I was like, I am totally out of my element. Like I'm
Yes.
having to learn so much. And we, like both studios, struggled so much with microphones. And I think part of it was that, like, there's 30 plus classes on the schedule. The teachers are like rotating through them. Some are like, teaching classes where they're rolling on the microphones. Others are like going upside down and then the
Oh,
mic's
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
plopping down.
Those lav mics are not meant for you to be like, okay, like lay on your belly now, turn one cheek. Yeah, it's just like it's such a different game.
No, 100%. It's like, yeah. And then you get these like crazy bad noises. And unless somebody's like going to tell you that, you have no idea till you watch the recording and you're like, wait, what? That's the
Yeah.
experience they had?
Oh
That's
my
not
God.
like Zen at all.
Oh, it's so painful. I had so many experiences of this happened to me multiple times of I wouldn't really be checking it. And this is the other thing. Like when you are filming online for a more reputable, not that I'm not reputable, but just like a space that has a lot more money for production, you're going to have somebody that's filming for you. You're going to have somebody that's listening to your audio the entire time. But when you're out there by yourself, just like in your house recording this with your mic and your phone, I have no idea if like the audio is going, and like I can look at the mic pack, but even then I don't know. And I this happened to me multiple times where I just like filmed like an hour class and I was like, that was exhausting. And I would go check in and there would be just no audio. It would just be
Oh
like
no.
silent. And I was like, okay.
You're like, I'm okay. I'm okay. Everything's fine.
Exactly.
It's
I mean,
okay.
exactly. But those moments are like lovely lessons. And that in itself is yoga in many ways, of just being like, shit happens and everything is kind of like a learning experience, or the moments where like I've had multiple classes where my internet has just cut out of nowhere. And, I have to scramble and get on my phone and like, I can't record the class anymore. I can't see anybody. It's just, we've always dealt with technical difficulties, in any yoga space, but this one, there is so much more of a propensity for things to go very, very wrong. And for you to have to kind of keep your cool is the wrong word, but go with the flow, like take it as it
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you're totally right. I mean, this is like the yoga off the mat, really, like learning to be okay with these moments and handle them without, losing your cool or losing your mind. And I get it. I mean, it's hard sometimes. Like I know with one of the studio that I work with in Canada, like one time last spring, it's like, oh, the power's down on all of Main Street, which is where the studio is and where like the class is live streaming from. And so it goes out like in the middle of yin, like the middle of the in class, just no power. And it's like,
What do we
I don't
do?
know, like, yeah, it's like, what do we do? And Zoom's so funny too, because it just gives host to somebody else if the host gets bumped off. And
Yes.
so the class is still going. There's just no teacher.
Nobody there. Yes, that's what's always so bizarre. And it's funny. I think when we think about moments like that happening, it's like, oh my God, like that's my worst nightmare. But I always found like it worked out and it was okay. I think it really, for me, brought to light. It's just like, don't sweat the small stuff in that way. And I always found that, let's say like my internet went out for a second, or for some reason the Zoom shut off and I'd have to go back on. And I remember I would always like profusely apologize. And I would be kind of like, oh my God, you guys, I'm so sorry. Like, and I remember I had a student message me and be like, hey, like, it's okay. Like, we're here for you. And like, this stuff is going to happen and like, you're figuring it out, but like, don't feel like you have to feel so bad. And I was like, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes when you are at a studio, and we've all probably had very wild, bizarre client experiences, as you find in the hospitality realm in a way. When you're in this space and you have people that are coming just for you, just for what you're offering, people tend to be that much more open to like kind of exploring the peaks and valleys and the ups and downs of your journey, with way more empathy than maybe if they were coming to just purchase a class and kind of like met you as a one-off.
Yeah. No, 100%. I completely agree with that. And I think like one thing I've really realized is that people are like quite understanding. Like I think people know that there's just certain things out of our control. Like if a storm blows through and your internet goes down, like there's just not much you can do.
Yes,
And,
yes,
it's not
exactly.
like you're just no showing the class, it's not like, hey, I didn't feel like showing up today, so I didn't do it. It's like, there's like stuff going on outside of our control.
Exactly. Exactly. And it also makes you just be like, okay, you know what? It's okay. Life will go on.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. One thing that, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but one thing that I think I've found through the work that I do that's been really helpful for situations like that has been having the on demand library. I know both studios that I work with have on demand libraries, and it really just started from like, we're doing these classes on Zoom, just like you and I are talking right now. And we have this easy ability to record. Why don't we hit record and just start uploading these classes so that as a bonus to members is kind of what we were doing it as, like as a way to like be like, please don't cancel your membership on us right now. Like we're doing the best we can with the situation. And over time, it's really evolved to be kind of like its own thing. And we get a lot like if there is a tech issue, or if maybe like the student has a tech issue that's completely unrelated to the class, they'll be like, it's okay. I just did like an on-demand class with the same teacher. And I feel like it's been this amazing like product to sell on its own, but also this amazing bonus to have. I'd love to hear a little bit about like, just your experience having this like on demand aspect of your membership.
Yeah. I honestly think that that is like one of the biggest perks is the wrong way to say it, but I think how I get a lot of people in reality, because I think there's actually the interesting thing about the online world is that people that maybe never would have done a public class or a live class are exploring this stuff because it feels maybe more accessible, or maybe somebody is really just hoping that they don't want to be viewed or watched or do it on their own time. So I think having that the on-demand library in mind has gotten pretty huge over time. It's kind of incredible because if I am, and I'm a big proponent of rest, and I'm never going to be the girl that's like, I'm doing a live every single day this week because that's what you guys want. Like, no, that's not sustainable, and I'm not going to be giving you a product that's good. So I think that the on-demand library also, if you need to take a break, like if you for some reason cannot teach your class, because that's what's different when you're running your own business, there's this feeling of like, I always have to be available and present. But that's not realistic. Like you're a human being. So having the on-demand aspect of things is an incredible thing to fall back on. And it's also, I think, a lovely way to cater niche things for different people. As far as like if you're doing an on-demand class that's just like 10 minutes long, that's something that you can make easily and that you'll be surprised that people are like really down for, or just kind of exploring something that I really want to explore that's like a little funky and weird, and I film it and kind of can like see how it's received and what's happened, so it can be a bit of experimentation at the same time, and then you never know who's going to stumble upon it and be like, well, that was sick.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it's exactly like you mentioned, like it's a lot of opportunity for teaching a variety of classes. Like I think in the traditional studio model, we're kind of like we teach like generally 60, 75-minute or maybe 90-minute classes. And I mean, there's a lot you can do in that time, but there's also like not always room for like, hey, let's like break down a pose today, or let's do like a how to on an arm balance, or let's like play around with this for a little bit. And I think you can really do a lot of that on with videos. And then also you can just have like so much variety, like anywhere from like 5 minutes to 60 minutes. And I think people like that because it's like, I think that the traditional model like holds some people from coming back for a variety of reasons.
Oh,
Like you
really?
said, yeah, I mean, like you said, like some people don't want to be seen. Some people don't feel comfortable in studios, but
Yeah.
also some people just don't have like an hour plus commute to go to a class.
Absolutely. Or just the means money wise, because classes in person can be super expensive. And, especially the online world is cool in that it does just open up more opportunities for other things. And I find maybe if somebody might explore a like 10-minute handstand exploration in that setting, in an online setting, whereas if they were to see that class like on a schedule, they would be like, absolutely not, there's no way I'm going to explore that. So it opens things up. But I agree. The timing is very interesting because I realized like, okay, people like things short. Good to know. It's funny.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm kind of like that. When I go onto like on-demand platforms, I'm like 20 minutes or 60 minutes. I think I'll do 20 minutes.
Exactly. I think all of our oh my God, my brain can't get there. Our time span, our attention
Oh, like
span,
attention span. Yeah.
our attention span really, we all kind of, it lessened a little bit over this time when you're at home.
Yeah.
It's tricky when you're at home.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's one thing I found is like it's tricky if you're on like the same device that you're working on, maybe. Like I do everything from my laptop. So it's like, my laptop was like my social hour, my exercise hour, my work hours, my TV hours. So it's like, I'm like, okay, I'm a little bit like over this device at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. And also,
Amazing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, just it's difficult to be in a space where it's like you're sleeping here, you're working here, eating here, you're working out here. And it can be tricky for people.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, I wanted to ask, I know that you've started teaching back in person. What's it been like as you've been like transitioning to hopefully what will soon be a post-pandemic world?
I know. Um, Tricky. I love teaching in person. Like the online world has been such a gift and I think it's cool and I don't see it ending for myself. But in person, the energy exchange is just like, okay, good. I'm not holding it all up on my own. Um, but it will be an interesting period of like all of us kind of trying to figure out how to not burn out as we transition to kind of exploring both and like marketing our own stuff, but maybe stepping back into these studios just because like those spaces can pay more. And like I'd love to say I make enough to support myself off of my platform, but I feel like there's more time and there's more that I would want to do in order for that to happen. So it will be tricky. I think, again, I am just trying to make sure that I'm not burning myself out.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've started teaching back at studios and privates and that type of thing.
Yes, I stayed privates for majority of the pandemic. But back in like in-person classes and stuff like that. And I started doing an in the park class every Saturday.
Cool.
Yeah, which has been fun. So yeah, it's just like a lot of things kind of coming together at once and just trying to be gentle with myself while hustling, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the hustle's real as a full-time yoga teacher.
It really is.
Well, I'm happy to hear that things in LA are opening back up. I think every time I talk to somebody who's like, I'm teaching in person again, I feel like so much genuine joy just because, I love the online world too, but I think there is something really special about being in person. And it's nice to have us moving back towards like some semblance of normalcy, whatever that means these days.
Exactly.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, and we've talked, you've weaved a lot of this in already, but what are some of the biggest business lessons you've learned throughout your whole career?
Um, don't undersell yourself. Like really, really understand what you are worth and don't take less, as many of us have. Um, Say yes within reason. I think a lot of the opportunities that maybe I would have said no to later in my career that I said yes to at the beginning were actually the things that unlocked some super incredible things. If shit goes really wrong and you really F it up, um, hell yeah, that's okay. Like it's probably going to be a massive lesson and you'll learn something amazing from it. Yeah, take risks, take major risks.
Amazing. I love all of those. And I particularly love take risks because I think that we really grow the most in the doing the things that scare us.
Oh, hell yeah. Absolutely. For sure.
Amazing. Well, this has been awesome. I've loved our time together. Can you share with listeners and people watching where they can go to find you?
Yeah. So I'm also on Interval. It should just be interval.com/Ariadne VD. You can find all of my schedule online and in person, just on my Instagram. That's truly where I share everything. It's Ariadne VD, Ariadne VD. It's a mouthful. Yeah, I usually send out an email every week. If you want to get on the mailing list, you can always just DM me. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been great. And another shout out to Interval. Thank you so much to Interval for sponsoring this episode and for connecting us. They were who got us in touch. And if anyone is interested in checking out Interval, make sure you go check out interval.com. And then of course, checking out your site is a great way to see like the actual site in action. And yours is so beautiful. I love like all the pink and it just looks so fun.
Wow.
I love it. You're on brand. Amazing. And thank you to everyone who's joined us live and watching the replay and listening to this later. This has been super fun.
Yeah, thank you. It's so good to meet you, Amanda.
All right, friends, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast. If you like the idea of the live episode style, I would love to hear from you. Send me an email, info@mbmyoga.com. Let me know what you think and if this is something that you would listen to and all of that good stuff. And just a huge shout out to Interval. I'm so appreciative that they sponsored this episode of the show. And it's so cool to see all the amazing software that has popped up throughout the pandemic to really support yoga teachers and studio owners. So make sure you go check them out and give them some love. interval.com/J/MBO. Or of course, you can just go to interval.com. All right, that's all for me. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.